Please like, subscribe, and put on your notification. Thank you.
Hello once again, and welcome to Tutelage Services. I still remain Mr. Michael Gauthier, TS in Child Economics. Today we have another topic today. Our topic today is on costs. What is costs? We all know costs, but let us define or discuss costs today before we really move on to it. Now, every firm or company decides to produce things, whatever it entails, whatever amount of money you pay for certain goods and services trying to produce things is cost. But now let's define it. Cost can be described as the amount paid or given up in order to get something. Now, in business, cost is the monetary valuation of efforts put into any work, material resources you are going to get, time consumed, time used, and then utilities consumed during production of goods and services in a company. So whatever the amount of valuation you value what you are put into it, it's what you call cost. So the monetary value now will be determined always. So if we have to continue now, we know what cost is now. So we know that costs are the necessary expenditures that must be made in order to run a business. No firm exists without expenditure. So whatever you spend in trying to produce things, even for service render, utilities used and so on, whatever you have done, that money spent or amount of value you have added to that becomes what you call the cost. So every cost of production has an associated cost. Now when you are producing, don't forget there's labor in it, there's land, there's capital, there's whatever you put into it. Now, for example, now the cost of labor is measured in terms of wages and benefits fixed. So a laborer working for you, you have to pay wages. So what's the cost of that effort the laborer put to the work is measured in terms of the wages or salary you have paid to the person. Now, fixed assets used by a firm or a company also has a value. The asset can depreciate or appreciate. So if it depreciates, the value, it drops. If it appreciates, means the value is increased. So it can measure in depreciation and so on. So costs variable means the amount of money spent in anything during production. Now we have different types of costs. And the first we can talk about is fixed costs. We have variable costs, we have semi-variable costs, total cost, direct cost, and indirect cost. Now let's look at the first, which is fixed costs. When something is fixed, we mean something is constant. That means it's not changed, or cannot be changed, or does not change. That we say fixed. So let's define it now. In a firm or a company, we can say that these are costs that do not vary with the level of output in the short term. Short term means in the near future. Almost within a year, we mean a short term. After a year, we can say as a long term. So when the cost of things you spend money for in the firm within a year does not change, you can take that cost to be a fixed cost. Now they are sometimes called overhead costs. That is, fixed costs can be called overhead costs. Examples of overhead costs or fixed costs can be rent, salaries, taxes, insurance, and so on. When a company pays salaries to workers, that does not change within a short period. There may be promotion and so on, but after a while, the salary can change, the rent can change, insurance, all this can change. So these things are called the fixed cost because they don't really vary. Now let's go to the next one, which is variable cost. Variable cost. What is variable cost? These are type of costs that vary in direct proportion with the level of output. When you produce much, you have to use materials in producing much. So as you are increasing your production, definitely your cost of production will also increase because materials are increased in trying to produce more products. Daily purchases depend on price of items and supply. In the market, prices change when you are trying to produce things or buy things you need for your work. So when the prices change, it also affects production because your expenses or expenditure will definitely increase. For example, if a firm produces more cars, it has to use more raw materials for the increased production. Thereby, they order more and then they get more supply. The price of those orders will also increase. So definitely the cost will become more variable because it's not fixed for that period. So that is variable cost. Now, semi-variable cost comes in now. For semi-variable cost now, contains both fixed and variable cost elements. What do we mean by this? The costs are fixed for a set level of production or consumption and become variable after this production level is exceeded. Now, if you order certain things to be produced and you have marked the prices of fixed this for it now, definitely you know very well that at that period you set aside for your production, when that time exceeds, there's always what's called overtime. More laborers may be needed now to ensure that work is finished within that period you set for yourself. So if that time elapses now, every other cost now comes in additionally to what you planned before. So that timeline becomes semi-variable because it's not variable because you have both variable and fixed costs in it, the element in it. So when workers work and work closes at, let's say 4 o'clock is set time for every company to close work, and then work continue till 6 p.m. Additional 2 hours will be paid as overtime. That's not part of the salary of the worker, like we said, under the fixed cost. So this becomes overtime, which is now added as a semi-variable cost. Moving forward, we can now go to the next one, which is total cost. Total cost. Now, from what total, it has to do with what? Putting all the costs together. So this is sum of all costs incurred by a firm in producing a certain level of output. It is made up of fixed costs and the variable cost. When these two are added, it becomes total cost. A firm can take total cost by checking all expenses, both variable and fixed, in a period, mostly in a year, monthly, depends on the firm's accounting or how they want to calculate their cost. So the formula can also be total cost equal to fixed cost plus variable cost, total variable cost, which is TVC, and then TFC for total fixed cost. Now moving to the next, which is direct cost. What is direct cost? When we say a cost is direct, it means that the company or the firm can directly link the cost of a particular project or object or material or anything that they pay money for or spend money for, link it to that specific thing. It means it is a direct cost. So let's define it. These are expenses that a firm can easily connect directly to the production of specific goods or services. It can be traced to the cost of objects, which can be a service, product, or department. Department means the cost in running a particular department in a particular period, or producing a particular thing, or rendering service given. Examples of this can be supplies in laboratories we use, electronics, equipment can be rented or hired, whatever it is, the cost will be associated to that. If a firm sends the workers to training, the cost of the training they have, so this training, the cost will be incurred, which you come under direct cost because you cannot know you spend a particular amount of money for the trainings you have in your company. So that becomes a cost which you can call direct cost. If the firm will send some workers on travels, going up and down, the cost associated with it, other air flights and so on, all the costs incurred during that period can be a direct cost because you have a specific amount of money assigned to that. Now I'm going to indirect costs. Indirect costs, these are costs that are not directly accountable to costs objects. How do we mean? Indirect costs include administration. When you run certain things at times, you may not really project that this amount of money you want to spend for that, but it comes in under administration. So this cost can be indirect costs when you are talking about indirect costs. It can also be personnel, advertising, maintenance, and security costs. All these costs can be put together as indirect costs because you cannot really say this is assigned to a specific thing, but they come in which you have amount of money, you have cost for it. So these are costs which are not directly related to production. Production means that you are getting materials or raw materials for production for anything new. But when this comes in indirectly, it will be but not part of the plan to spend amount of money for security, for personnel, or all this. So indirectly, we know this is what indirect cost. So talking about cost generally, whatever amount of money spent by a firm documented down that can be checked, calculated, audited, and seen is cost. but the course also varies. That's what I mentioned in terms of course so far. So I hope you have enjoyed this topic and gained much from this topic we have. So if you have enjoyed this now, you can like us, share, and subscribe to Tutelage Educational Services. Thank you. See you next time again for next topic we're going to have.